All right, this is going to be a presentation that I've done a couple times. I've done this presentation at WordCamp Jacksonville, WordCamp, I think Orlando, no, Asheville, um, and WordCamp, most recently WordCamp Netherlands, which was cool. I'm also speaking at WordCamp Birmingham, and I'm going to do the same presentation here. And let's get my slides working. There we go. Cool. So I'm going to be going through and kind of explaining the technical background on what the problem is sending mail from your website and why it's problematic and why it doesn't wind up in your inbox a lot of times. I'll be going through the DNS domain name system, and I'll be going through the actual problem and why it's set up the way it is, and then I'll go through with a solution with a plugin that I recommend. I won't have Q&A. Normally I'm doing this live in a group, of like 50 people or so, and we have Q&A. I won't be having that unless I talk to myself, which would be quite awkward. All right, so I'm not quite as bearded, and I'm a lot more gray than I used to be, but I'll say that's because I'm a father of four, and I live in Atlanta, Georgia. I've been a WordPress developer since 2008. I guess I first used WordPress in 2005. If I remember correctly, it was at version 1.5 point something. I own an agency called Clockwork WP. WP obviously stands for WordPress. I am a WordCamp Atlanta organizer, and I've been involved in helping out with the WordCamp Atlanta for, I don't know, 7 years or so. And then I lead a somewhat inactive meetup in Atlanta. That should change now that COVID has subsided. Knock on wood, right? All right. So that's a little about me, and I'm going to explain it at a technical level because I think it's important to know why you're installing this plugin, why you're going through these steps, and what the problem is. So really, so you can explain it to your clients, because like the Violent Femmes say, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. So I figured more knowledge is better than none. All right, email in the 1990s. Let me explain this. We used to use these really bad CGI scripts to send mail. Now that's kind of been ported over to PHP, and now within WordPress we have the ability to create a form and submit it. It'll ask for, just for this case, ask for your name, your subject, and your message and your email address, right? So I mean, just real simple information. And when you submit, you go to the contact form, you put in your name, your email, and your subject, and you hit submit. In the background, it tries to run, it meaning the web server, WordPress, is told to try to send mail. And I'm going to walk you through step by step what all is going on, but this is how email used to be sent. This is kind of the conversation that the sending and receiving server does. Sending server says, hey, I have an email from a forum from your website for bob@yourcompany.com. The receiving server says, great, I don't get much mail, send it to me, and the sending server sends the mail, and the job is done. The receiving server says, I got it, thanks. Now when you send email, similar concept, but now we have these wonderful things called spam filters. And so the sending server sends mail, says, hey, I have an email from your website for bob@yourcompany.com. The receiving server says, yourcompany.com. Let me check DNS records. And it goes and it looks and it says, why is email coming from the web server? That's not what the mail, that's not where the mail should be coming from. So it's rejected. And the sending server says, sent, my job is done. Because yes, the email was sent, it just was either rejected or sent to spam or something like that. But when you fill out that form on the website, you just don't know the difference. It looks like it's sent, and yeah, the email is sent. It's just not being delivered, or it's being sent into a box that no one checks. So that's the crux of the problem, and I'm going to walk you through all that. What is DNS? DNS stands for Domain Name System, and your domain name server runs that system. And it's actually pretty simple what DNS is. When you try to go to clockworkwp.com in your browser, you type in clockworkwp.com, you hit enter, and then magically the website is pulled up. And what happens is your browser says go to clockworkwp.com, and the computer says, okay, when I got my IP address for the computer or phone or whatever it is you're trying to go to the website on, it looks and it says, okay, we're trying to pull up Clockwork WP, so let's look up the DNS, and it responds and says, okay, the DNS server says, hey, the website's on this IP address, and your browser takes that IP address and converts clockworkwp.com to that IP address, and magically, boom, the website appears. So DNS is real similar to like a phone book, a little old school here, but a phone book is, my name, Aaron Ryman, but you don't know my phone number. So you used to be able to go to your phone book and look up under Ryman, find Aaron, and there's probably only one Aaron Ryman, and boom, there's my phone number. DNS is kind of the same thing. It translates the known to the unknown, vice versa, because it's really hard for everyone to remember IP addresses for all the websites that they go to. DNS does a lot of things. For example, I have things in here that are bolded or red, bold and red, or just bolded. Those are DNS records that I deal with regularly, like your A record, your IP version 6 record, your MX records, your CNAMEs and TXT records. I'm just showing that DNS has a lot of moving parts, and you can do a lot with DNS. You don't have to be an expert though to solve this or to set this up properly, but I think it's important to know what these records are. MX records are super important. They stand for mail exchange records, and so if you try to send email to sideways8.com, which is my previous company when I first did this talk, that was what I used, so I'm using these same screenshots. But in here, when you send email to sideways8.com, my email client goes and looks up what are the MX records for Sideways 8, and then it sends it to those servers. And these are publical, made up a word, coined it. These are some public records basically, that anyone can look up. So if your website is receiving mail, it has MX records to accept that mail. And when you're sending mail from a web server, let me just walk you through kind of this animated GIF that I have. In this animated GIF, I'm doing what's called SSH. So I SSH into the web server, and I connect, and then from the command line, when I'm connected to the web server, I am sending an email using a program called Mail. So look at this animated GIF where I connect, I log into the server, and I type in mail-s, S-S is for subject, so the subject is test WordCamp mail, and then where I want it to go to, which is Aaron R at sideways8.com. And then the subject is, this is a test, don't send mail this way, and you hit Control D to send, and the email is sent. So again, I'm connecting to a web server, not an email server. I'm connecting to a web server that has a program called SendMail installed on the server. And the problem is that one, Google sees it as spam. It doesn't know what a2s37.a2hosting.com is. I mean, that's obviously not my website. And DNS does a reverse DNS lookup, and it's like, hey, what do we do with this mail? And so it's flagged as spam, basically. And if you don't install a plugin to do this on your web server, it's going to use whatever is available for it to run, and I'll walk you through this. So, the web server A2 S37 doesn't have any D records or DNS records or anything to say, hey, this should have gone to Aaron R at clockworkwp.com or Sideways 8, whatever it is. And it just doesn't know what to do with it. We could tell it to, go into, so if I'm sending an email to Sideways 8, I could go in and put a TXT record in there to say, hey, also include not just the teamwork email and SendGrid and all those things. Also, let's add, was it A2S37 dot, in there. But what if I move the website from one server to the next? I don't want to always have to keep my TXT records up to date. All right, so how does WordPress send mail? Well, if you look at the source code of WordPress, and obviously this is all open source stuff, it's all documented, and you look at the source code here on line 415, it says set to use PHP's mail function. So all WordPress does is says, hey, pass this on to PHP and let PHP do all the work. And if you look at there we go. If you look at the PHP mail function, it's exactly the same thing as what I did. I went into the command line, connected to the server, via SSH, and sent that mail space -s, and then in the subject, this animated GIF, I'll go over here, basically mail -s, this this little thing here, that is the exact same function that PHP tries to run when you send mail, when you fill out a contact form. By default, it uses the mail function. So what if you don't have mail installed on your web server? I don't install mail on my web servers because a web server is for web and mail server is for mail. But most sites that get hacked that I've seen, all they're trying to do is figure out a way to turn this web server into a mail relay server, and it just starts sending a ton of spam. So mail might not even be installed on the web server, so you got to make sure that you have a solution to solve this problem. So like I said, one, mail might not be installed, so that's one reason why you need a solution. The mail could be seen as spam by using something like SendGrid, where their whole business model is making sure things don't wind up in spam. It's a good tool. Your DNS might not be set up to send mail from your web server, and what if your web server also changes the IP address or the name and whatnot, and you have that in your TXT record? You're going to have to constantly, anytime you move your site, or if your web hosting company moves it automatically from one server to the next, you have to keep that up to date. So by installing a plugin to route the mail, it's going to solve this problem. So you can ignore this because some people say, well, I don't even have a contact form on the website, so I don't need the solution, Aaron. No, and I'll say, well, what about password resets? That's the only thing that comes in real handy if someone has forgotten their password. Getting into the database to reset a password is hard, whereas a password reset tool is nice. So if your web server isn't set up to route the mail properly, it might not even send that. So even if you don't send mail, it's always good to use it for the password reset. So use a plugin for that. Or there's third-party tools like SendGrid and or Mailgun. Not and, I guess SendGrid or Mailgun to do that. So here's the solution. Pay attention, everyone. Normally in the WordPress community, the most important thing is to use a popular plugin. That way it shows, that the plugin's up to date. There's a community behind it. And I normally would see, well, 2 million active installs, that's got to be a good plugin to use, right? Well, yes and no. This plugin that when you type in SMTP, Send Mail Transfer Protocol, SMTP, a couple plugins show up, and this one, the problem I have with WP Mail by WP Forms is that it says that this is an email logging plugin, and it is if you have a paid subscription. Whereas this plugin over here gives you an email, it's actually true to what it says it is. It's an email log, and you don't have to pay for it. Not only does this plugin give you email logging, it gives you a fallback, it also gives you Slack integration, etc., etc. I'll show you. So this is the plugin I recommend. It allows us to do SMTP, which is just a username and password that you can use to connect to a web server, or you could use something like SendGrid or Mailgun. One of the cool features that it has, it also does a fallback. So if for some reason your SendGrid account is past due and they shut you down or something, you can set up a fallback to send mail where you can put in your Gmail SMTP credentials in here, change the security here to use a username and password, and it sets up the fallback. And then if the first one fails and the second one fails, you can also set up Slack integration. So if the web server is not sending the mail, you can set it up to get a Slack notification. So that way nothing is lost. And also we have a log, and so you could set it up to log everything. And then you can go back, log in, and look and see how things are, when email stopped working, and then you can go back and resend all of them once you fix the problem. So to me, this plugin's pretty incredible. You can use a Mailgun plugin, but it doesn't stay as up to date, and we also don't have all of those features. You don't have the fallback, the log, and the Slack integration. Same with SendGrid. SendGrid gives you the same type of functionality as this plugin, but it doesn't give you all those great features. So that's why I recommend that plugin. And when you set up your SendGrid account or Mailgun account, it doesn't really matter to me which one you use. I lean towards SendGrid because SendGrid will send up to 100 emails a day for free forever, and that works for the majority of my clients at least. So you might have to drop in some TXT records and MX records and things like that. If you set up SendGrid, you only have to set up 3 TXT records. It's pretty trivial, and you just copy and paste. It'll walk you through the process of setting up a SendGrid account. And once you have SendGrid set up, or Mailgun, but I'm going to focus on SendGrid, you'll have this awesome log too. So not only do we have a plugin that keeps track of things, we also can log into SendGrid, and if someone's not getting the mail, you can go through and figure out, okay, look, it was received by SendGrid, it was processed, but it was blocked, and here's why it was blocked, which is golden right there. To me, no brainer. So that pretty much sums up my talk. Um, why you want to use this wonderful plugin called, let's see, Post SMTP Mailer slash email log. Great plugin. And if you want to become a DNS expert, read this book. I read it about 21 years ago or so. It's still relevant today because DNS is not going to go anywhere. Another thing that I found while I was doing this is I found this great tool where you can send an email. So if I'm logged in as Aaron R at clockworkwp.com, and I send an email to check-auth at verifier.port25.com, it'll automatically send you an email a couple minutes later that tells you the status of your mail server. So I can check and see, are my SPF records set up correctly? Is my DKIM record set up correctly? Things like that. Great tool. Just recommend. That's a good starting point for you to start figuring out if you need to solve this. So, all right. I hope you enjoyed the talk. Reach out to me. I am on Twitter at aryman, or you could just shoot me an email, aaronr@clockworkwp.com. Thanks.